Hello and welcome to She's of Love, and today we have an Ancient Mysteries episode. Today is another one that delves into ancient Egypt, but it goes to an unexpected place that I never really knew existed until researching it and just kind of randomly coming across it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is to do with the connections between ancient Australia and ancient Egypt. So the connections between Australian Aboriginals and ancient Egyptians, which is kind of wild that that's even a thing. I didn't think that, I don't know, it's just kind of wild because it's so far away from each other. So yeah. Do you have anything before we get into it?
Maybe just that nothing surprises me, and you tend to find the things that are pretty wild. So yeah, I'm interested to know.
Yeah, so I'm going into this episode with factual information, as factual as I can come across. And, usually with Ancient Mysteries, I don't try and connect things too much because I think part of the fun is having your own opinion, creating your own connections. But I must admit, since this is about connecting two cultures together,
you're going to pass opinion?
I am going to pass opinion a little bit because, we're Australian, how could I not? So.
Do Australians pass opinion?
Well, no, because it's about Australia.
Oh, right. Okay.
I don't know. I just never really thought I would be doing... I'm very excited because I didn't think I would find much information to do with Ancient Mysteries and ancient Australia, just because Aboriginal culture is so private and sacred, and it's not really out there in the ether to look online for. So, I'm excited about this episode. So, let's get into it. So, I think I'll start with what this the main topic, the main source of wonder and mystery, which is the fact that there are over 300 hieroglyphs found carved in stone just 2 hours north of Sydney in a place called Gosford. And these hieroglyphs are known as the Gosford glyphs. You can Google it, but Google is basically going to tell you that they're a hoax. And I think this is a really important part of the argument of addressing the whole hoax issue, because even though I personally don't think that it is a hoax, I think presenting that information is still important and just kind of discussing both sides.
It's funny to me how when you discredit something as a hoax, you don't have to provide any proof. You can just say it was a hoax because, so-and-so said it was, or this person said it was. But when you're trying to prove something as real or factual, you have to back it up, with actual information that is verified.
Well, you can do that and still it not do anything.
Like casting a shadow on something and making people go, don't know about that, is so easy.
Yeah.
So that in itself should say something, I think. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, basically, these hieroglyphs were officially documented in the 70s, but there was talk about it and it was kind of a local legend. We don't have a real time frame, but most people say that rumours started coming up around the 1910s and 20s. And the whole hoax argument is that it's impossible for ancient Egyptians to have been in Australia, and there's kind of a translation that they provide of the hieroglyphs.
Who's they?
I say they, and I would say Egyptologists who've looked into it, but really I can't say because you can Google the translation, and the main translation that comes up is what is used as evidence to provide that it's a hoax. And basically in the mainstream translation that you can Google, I first want to say I don't know of anything that has backed this up, of any sources that have confirmed that this is really what it says, but the hieroglyphs that have been translated and put online speak of basically this prince, and he's an actual like pharaoh, prince, pharaoh, I don't know. I don't think he's a pharaoh, I think he's a prince. That he's an actual ancient Egyptian that's been documented. And yeah, it speaks of him and his brother, all actual ancient Egyptians, and how they came over, and one of the brothers was bitten by a snake, and that now the brother is buried, and no one's going to know where he's buried.
Is this the Google version?
This is the Google version, and the Google version is like speaking about how these princes sailed over, and there was.
So they're not like they're not arguing that there was no pharaoh a prince in Australia. They're not arguing that.
No, they are, because their argument against this whole hieroglyph in Australia thing, a big reason for why they're claiming that it's a hoax, is because of the people that are in the story of this hieroglyph. So the evidence that Egyptologists make is basically that it has to be a hoax because these, it's too old, like these princes existed too long ago for it to be possible. And and they're actually quite right. And we'll get into why there is another translation that has been done that is different and doesn't mention these princes. Yeah, Egyptologists that have made a new translation have agreed with this argument that it is too old for these two princes to be in Australia.
Why would somebody put hieroglyphs on a cave in Australia about princes that were never here?
I don't know.
That just sounds weird.
It is very weird. And yeah, as I said, there's no real verification on the publicly translated hieroglyphs that you can just find online.
Did they say what, like who put it there?
No, there's no, like, oh wait.
There's only a translation.
Oh no, there's theories. So along with the whole hoax argument, the main theory is that either World War I soldiers came back from Egypt and did this as a whole prank, and because they saw the hieroglyphs in Egypt and they came back and they copied it and put it down. Doesn't make any sense to me that is plausible, because as we'll get into this soon, the hieroglyphs are not in a public place. They're not easily found. They're not just on a trail somewhere.
So if you wanted to prank something, someone would put it somewhere where it's more noticeable.
Yeah, and also another huge thing which I think really needs to be taken into more consideration is the fact that you cannot just look at hieroglyphs and write them down and then create a verifiable story, because even in the public translations there's still a plausible story. There's still a written out story that people have been able to translate, supposedly. So even if the public recorded translation is real, it still doesn't make sense to me that it was just a World War II soldier, because you can't just look at hieroglyphs and be like, oh,
yeah, good point,
let's rewrite this and make. It's like looking at a language and just copying it after seeing it a few times, but not only is it a language that doesn't exist anymore, like isn't spoken, isn't written, it's also very complicated. It's not, and there's also, again, there's so much into this, but there's symbols that haven't been made publicly, like, because you can get hieroglyphic books, and you could even get hieroglyphic books back then where you could like look at the meaning of the hieroglyph, but there's symbols in these carvings that haven't been publicly released until 2012. So like, and this again was discovered in the 70s, publicly documented, but was talked about since the 20s. So it's impossible that it's just some dude thinking, oh, these hieroglyphs are cool while he's over fighting a war in Egypt. Like, that just makes little to no sense. So
and to be able to put them together to make a story.
Yeah, it is so mind-baffling to me. And then the other thing that you could argue is, well, maybe it was a professor, maybe it was someone who knew what they were doing. But again, the whole 2012 modern day hieroglyphs that have only just been released and with a translation, it just still isn't plausible. And why would a professor want to do that in his spare time? I mean, okay, weird stuff happens all the time, but I really cannot imagine a professor in Egyptology or an Egyptologist wanting to waste his time doing this. Like, I just really cannot imagine that as something happening. Like, that's a really, for the sakes of argument and debate, that's a really big assumption. That's a really big assumption that just doesn't have much of a foundation to it. So, with this, well, I don't want to say conspiracy because I'm using facts, but with this theory that it was ancient Egyptians that did put these hieroglyphs out, there comes a lot of other backing that you have to make this a real argument. Like, okay, well, if it was ancient Egyptians, how did they get there? Like, how is it even plausible for them to get there? Because again, not only are these hieroglyphs in Australia, they're on the east coast of Australia, which when you look at a map, geographically, Egypt is on the western side, north, but it's west. When you're looking at, like, oh, I'm going on a boat trip, they would most likely land in either northern Australia or western Australia. But they have to go all the way around to, I would say, southern eastern Australia. So basically the opposite side. And it's not a common, like, I don't know, it just seems like such a ways away. So they have to have really good transport for this, surely. Like, they can't just be doing this in canoes. But we do know that ancient Egyptians had boats that were, I want to say, ocean going. I would definitely anger a lot of people saying that, but there's a lot of stories. Well, first of all, there's an actual, you go to Egypt in, I believe it's the Cairo Museum, there's an actual boat that you can go and look at, and it's really big. It's like twice the size of the boats that Christopher Columbus colonized the world in. And so we know that they had boats bigger than Christopher Columbus's. There's also stories written in hieroglyphs of actual navy battles and wars, which the Egyptians won. So these stories of navy battles is a really big thing to note, because historically, ancient Egypt technically haven't had any recorded navy battle before these stories of these princes. I believe I've got the names here. Merneptah and Pharaoh Merneptah and Ramesses III as well. They both have stories of navy battles in their rule, under their rule, and the first one is by Merneptah, and this is the first ever recorded navy battle that we know of in ancient Egypt, and they blasted their enemy, and their enemy was actually what we believe to be southern Europe, so Greece, Italy and stuff, because they use geographical city names that belong in those countries. And so they were fighting a navy battle with these ocean traders, ocean-going countries that knew the ocean supposedly a lot better than ancient Egypt. I mean, when you think about it, it's crazy that ancient Egypt won against these countries in this navy battle, but they did, and it was their first ever time battling against anyone in a navy battle, let alone these countries so experienced in ocean trading and boats and just the ocean in general. So to me, that provides at least a little bit of evidence as to they have experience in the ocean. I mean, it just seems so unlikely that they won their first ever Navy battle against these kinds of countries.
Well, maybe because they had bigger boats and more people. I mean, that counts for a lot.
Yeah, that does. Fair enough. But it's still pretty wild.
Yeah.
Heard about ancient Egypt and all the resources and gold and, you know, the legends and myths that come across, because at this time ancient Egypt was one of the main superpowers, and so they came to battle and then they lost and Egypt won, and that was that. So yeah, you have stories of Navy battle, but then you also have this story with Queen... Why are Egyptians' names so hard to say? Queen Hatshepsut. I'm just going to say Queen Hatshepsut. That seems right to me. Yeah, anyway. You heard
I'm not
me.
even going to attempt it.
Yeah, you heard me. So, basically, the story of this queen, she's kind of a bit of a legend. And
just call her Queen H.
Queen H, yeah. There's this famous story and hieroglyph of her, and she went on this trading expedition to Puntland, P-U-N-T, Punt, and we don't know where Puntland is. We don't know where it is. We don't know what country, but people think that it's Somalia or some other African country along the southern coast of Africa. That's what most people say, but then again, it could be, if you're thinking about, well, if these hieroglyphs were actually by ancient Egyptians and you put that into the argument, then Puntland could technically also be Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this big boat in the hieroglyph of this story, and there's tons of people on this boat.
On the Gosford glyphs?
No, so sorry. Let me backtrack. This hieroglyph of this expedition is in ancient Egypt, and it's recording the story of Queen H going on this trading expedition.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful hieroglyph. If you ever want to look at it, it's gorgeous. And it's got this big boat, and there's trees on the boat, there's people on the boat, there's animals on the boat, and then on the bottom of the hieroglyph and on the top, there's like these sea creatures. There's lobster, squid, fish, and it just kind of says that, okay, well, if ancient Egyptians knew enough about these sea creatures to depict them well enough to put them in hieroglyphs, and by the way, it's a beautiful hieroglyph. You can clearly see it's a squid, it's a lobster. It's not like, you know, abstract. It's Egyptian hieroglyph. It's very accurate, and it's actually wildly accurate. Like, yeah, they've got on the lobster, the little antenna thingies, you know what I'm talking about, and the claws and everything, and that kind of says that, okay, so they were familiar enough with these sea creatures to be able to draw them to this accuracy. That says something. It says that they're familiar with the ocean, you know. And again, these creatures are local to the Dead Sea, so it's not like they're not local to the area. They are. But it just kind of says that they know more than what maybe the mainstream belief is.
So are the Egyptians taking those things with them on the boat, or are they just explaining how vast this boat was?
Well, so the hieroglyph, how it's set up is it's got the picture of the boat with the trees on it and people and animals and everything. And then it has a strip down the bottom and a strip up the top in this pattern of like fish, another type of fish, another type of fish, squid, another type of fish, lobster. And then it kind of like, it goes like in a sort of pattern along the top and the bottom. So it's not like the fish are on the boat, but it almost kind of talks about, I don't know what,
their
how
journey,
you, yeah,
what they saw, maybe.
Yeah, what they saw, I don't know. But it's not like it's on the boat. It's just, but it's intentionally put there on the hieroglyph to show these creatures. So it means that they knew more about the ocean than we give them credit for. Is what really it's saying to me.
Yeah.
So there's some like connections with ancient Egyptians and being seagoing. So it's not all that impossible that they sailed all the way. Like these boats that they were building were very much capable of making a journey across the Indian Ocean to Australia. Like it's definitely not impossible. And I mean, it would have been dangerous just like any journey on the sea, but yeah,
possible.
But definitely plausible in my books. Now, I want to get into some other evidences that link ancient Egypt and Australia, because this isn't the only link, which shocked me because I'd never heard about anything else that connects ancient Egypt with Australian Aboriginals. Like never, ever, ever. But ancient Aboriginals themselves, like elders carry stories of, I believe, those who came from the sea is what I've heard Aboriginals say in their Dreamtime stories. And some of these Aboriginals believe that those who come from the sea is actually ancient Egyptians.
Yeah, right.
And in their stories, they talk about trading with these people. And again, fun fact, but a lot of Dreamtime stories in the Aboriginal culture are not publicly shared because they're very sacred. So I don't really know. You can't just Google these Dreamtime stories. They're held within
their communities.
Yeah, within their community. So, but what there is to know is that the elders say that they're not shaken or surprised at all by, like, they believe that they have connections with ancient Egyptians. And it's something that I've actually had personal conversations with Aboriginals about before as well.
Yeah, right.
So, it's not that new to them. They knew all this time.
So really what you're saying is, like, our white culture are the ones saying it's not possible.
Well, yeah, and also, like, if there's anyone to believe, it's the culture that is still alive today and carries these stories thousands and thousands of years. I mean, they're the oldest culture in our whole world. They were alive while this was happening. We can't talk to ancient Egyptians, but we can talk to Aboriginals.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really big thing that we just kind of like...
Yeah, we're ignoring it.
We ignore that, and that's really not...
That's a really good point. I think that's probably the strongest point you've made so far, is that the people that we should be listening to are the people who hold on to the stories and who actually were the ones that had the experience.
Yeah. Because, you know, one thing that I learnt when, investing my interest in Australian Aboriginal culture is, like, how accurate the stories hold on to because of how they pass the stories down. It's not like a matter of... it's kind of like fairy tales. Like, fairy tales basically remain the same no matter what you talk about, because as a kid, that's what you hear over and over again. You have those one or two books that you keep reading, that you ask your parents to read you over and over and over. And it's one of those things that you never forget growing up, because, again, it's repeated in your society. I mean, like, for example, Cinderella. You watch a new Cinderella movie comes out, or... then you have a cousin that's into Cinderella, and we all know the story of Cinderella. It works the same in that way because it's just told over and over and over again, and it's kept sacred within within their community, within their circle. And actually, how I've heard the stories of like the Dreamtime stories get passed on is kind of like, as a child, it's very simplified, and then as you grow up, they add more to the story and they give you a deeper deeper understanding
as you can
grow.
mentally understand it.
Yeah, and
are capable of absorbing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I never knew that.
Yes.
That's amazing.
So that's why a lot of the stories that we get told of Dreamtime stories, they're the children level stories, and so that's why they're passed off as, oh well, that it can't be real.
People underestimate it.
Yeah, but
underestimate the stories.
Yeah, but that's because they keep the higher levels of the story with the extra detail and the deeper meaning.
It's like
sacred.
It's like another culture looking at our culture and saying, "Oh, they believe in Santa Claus. How funny are they?"
Yeah,
it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, but there's so there's stories that we know are just like the base children level, and that's why. I mean, I don't pass them off, and I know I've always been interested into it, but it just kind of seems like a theme in school. I remember getting taught Dreamtime stories in school, and it was I don't know, it was just passed off and we never really talked about it again. It was like, it seemed a little bit like, oh well, we've done that now, moving on to the next thing, and then it was never revisited. So yeah.
Was that the Rainbow Serpent?
I believe so. And we had this like one class where you would go online and you could like look at different Dreamtime stories, and that was pretty cool. But yeah, so fun fact about Dreamtime stories, and anyone correct me who knows more, but that's just what I've read about how Dreamtime stories work. So I'm not claiming to
be an expert
at all by any means, but
no, you're talking about your experience.
Yeah. So, moving on to the next point, is that there is actually boomerangs in ancient Egypt. They were found in Tutankhamun's tomb. There's dozens of them. They're found in various burial sites. They're not even a rare thing to find. It's not even that unusual at this point. And in ancient Egypt, the word that they use for boomerang actually translates to foreigner's weapon. That's a translation.
So they're admitting that it didn't come from them.
They're admitting that it's not their weapon.
Yeah, that they got it from a foreigner.
Yeah, and there's actual hieroglyphs of ancient Egyptians wielding a boomerang to hunt small birds and like for hunting, which is what...
Yeah, what a boomerang is for.
Yeah, that's what... yeah, exactly. So, to me, that's no coincidence. And, I mean, then again, hunting sticks have been used across multiple countries. It's not like just an Aboriginal thing, but...
Do they come back?
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems, along with the... Because they're used in the same shape as well. Like, because... or I should say shapes plural, because they have straight ones and they have like the classic one that we all know and love. They have like different types that are very similar to Aboriginal boomerangs.
And were Aboriginal boomerangs the first boomerangs and others copied, or?
Yeah. That begs the question. I mean, to me, it would make the most sense that, of course,
being
Aboriginal...
the oldest
culture.
Being
the oldest culture. I think they're something like 40,000 years old, the Aboriginal culture. That's wild. 40,000 years is so crazy. Like, I don't know, looking into ancient cultures, ancient mysteries... The Göbekli Tepe, which is the oldest megalithic structure that we know, is 12,000 years old. That's like a quarter. A quarter. That's insane. 40,000 years.
It's 28,000 years younger than the first, what they've dated as the first Aboriginal discovery.
Yeah, well, there's actually argument even today as to if it's older.
It's even older than that.
Well, Yeah, because I believe there was a skeleton found that was 50,000 years old, and it might have been a burial site or something.
I know there has been recent conjecture about how old it.
Yeah.
That they think
at least 40,000.
Yeah, they think that it's actually older than that.
That, like, let's just think about the last 1,000 years. Imagine what it was like to live 1,000 years ago. 40,000 years. These people were walking along with giant wombats and giant koalas and giant kangaroos, and like you look up the what's the type of animal with
marsupial.
Marsupial, yeah. Look up giant Australian marsupials that have like gone extinct. They're mythical creatures. They are mythical creatures.
Well, the creatures we have here now are mythical.
Yeah, the creature. Well, these are on another dimension. Like, imagine a giant koala bear just walking around. Like, bigger, it's twice the size of me. Just walking around. And these Aboriginals existed at the same time as these creatures. That's how...
Yeah, I think we have in the past, I won't say in the present, but in the past I think we have too easily dismissed the complexity and the genius of their culture.
40,000 years of building knowledge, of building connection, of wisdom. 40,000 years of wisdom. Because I'm telling you right now, they have stories from the origins. They have stories that have been existing since the conception of their culture.
Mm.
There is wisdom
that they hold stories.
That is 40,000 years old. Mm. And they hold that knowledge. That's like crazy. So, anyway. So there's boomerangs in ancient Egypt. Now, I investigated this because I was very interested. The ones found in Tutankhamun's tomb are made from ivory, but I was interested to see what wood, because there's also wooden ones found, and I wanted to find out what wood it was, because it would be very interesting if it was like eucalyptus, like a native Australian wood. But no matter how hard I looked, there was no information on what wood these boomerangs were found in, so that's a little bit sus to me. So you don't know, but there's wooden and there's ivory ones as well. There's also actual artifacts that have been discovered in Australia. There was an onyx beetle, like an onyx material beetle.
Carved into a beetle.
Yeah. Carved, and it was found in Queensland. Oh no, that was discovered in Penrith, and Penrith is in New South Wales. It's not too far from us, actually. It's only like 2 hours or something. And then there was another one found also in Queensland too. So there's been onyx, scarab beetles carved from onyx found in Australia. And then there's also the myth of the Gympie Pyramid. Now, this is shrouded. I did this, shrouded in a lot of mystery. I don't know if the Gympie Pyramid is a myth or if it's just seen as a natural occurrence or what. I don't know what's going on with the Gympie Pyramid, but basically there's a pyramid in Gympie, Queensland, and people believe it to be connected with ancient Egypt, because there was also a stone statue carving that was like depicted an ape, like this carving, and the ape is how one of the ancient Egyptian gods is portrayed very often.
Yeah, right.
same in Hindu culture as well. There's also gods in Hindu religion that
are depicted as apes.
And I just thought it was worth mentioning. So if anyone wanted to look into it themselves, but I think it's actually crazy that there's even a stone carving at all, let alone an ape. Because I don't know about you, but have you heard of any like statue carvings from Aboriginals? Because I haven't. There's cave art and
there's weapons and
there's
instruments,
weapons and boats and things like that, but never carving that I know of. So
good question. Not from the top of my head, I haven't heard of any.
So it seems very like crazy.
So you don't think the Aboriginals carved
well, I think maybe
an ape? But we don't have apes in Australia anyway.
Yeah, we don't. I think there was help. I think that there was a symbiosis of
does anybody say what
sacred beliefs?
Has anybody recorded or passed opinion on what the ape represents?
Well,
with the pyramid, do they go together?
Yeah, so the ape was found at the site of the pyramid.
But do they know if they went together, if one came first, or is there opinion?
I'm sure there's opinion. I think they're definitely they have to be correlated. You can't just.
Yeah, of course, but maybe one was there and then another was added later, or maybe they came together at the same time.
Well, the thing about stone is you can't date stone.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. There's a lot of mysteries surrounding this, and you can't find much scientific evidence, to be honest. I don't think it's something that's really looked into by scientists, archaeologists, geologists, anything like that.
I kind of find that around Australian, everything to do with ancient Australia is quite confusing.
Yeah.
Like, we're not taught it in schools. It's not something that we talk about at dinner.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, I mean, ancient Egypt is very studied and everybody talks about it. It's really, really well known around the world. You know, it's all very glamorous with all the gold and, you know, the pharaohs and the statues and the pyramids and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
They're artifacts. But I'm finding it very, as I grow older, I'm finding it more and more that there is less and less known about Australian history and the artifacts and the ancientness of our country.
It's very odd to me. I mean, the one thing that I can understand is that there's not many structures because...
but I think Aboriginal people were very connected to the land.
They used organic...
Yes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them were nomads.
Yeah.
So a lot of their culture had to be portable. And they needed to take it with them. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of their history is oral history. It's not tangible things that you can...
which makes it even more mysterious.
And date. Yeah, I think there's a lot of... I understand the reasoning as an archaeology... Oh my gosh. Words. From a scientific perspective, I'll say, I can understand why it's not a huge
interest
because in a scientific way you can't really look at it with your own eyes. You can't touch it and test it and that sort of thing because it's all within the people. It's all...
And a lot of the people have passed now. So I think, and there's been, since Australia was colonised, there was a disconnect because so many of the people were killed. And so how does that history get passed down through the generations if a whole generation of Aboriginal people were wiped out?
Yeah.
It's like there's a big divide.
Yeah, and I think that maybe if we look into it with an open perspective and not such a scientific, analytical...
They're more of a spiritual perspective people, aren't they?
Yeah, it would really, I don't know, bring to light some valuable information to our society. So, one last thing that's kind of like really important as far as evidence goes is the new translation, and I say new translation because
It's the newest.
Yeah, two Egyptologists, I can link their videos in the description. They're wonderful, wonderful people. They actually create tours for ancient history buffs and people who are very open-minded and just kind of want to know...
Are they still alive?
Yeah, they're still alive. They're making YouTube videos and stuff. And they are Egyptologists, and they are more open-minded and make a lot more sense than what the mainstream Egyptologists do. So they'll take you on tours of sites and actually tell you about how remarkable some of the things that they're doing and how it doesn't make sense, and their own 2 cents on how they believe what they believe around this site or this mystery to do with their own Egyptologist brain, because they're studied, they're well versed in this, and they actually are very open-minded and believe that the hieroglyphs, the Gosford glyphs, were created by ancient Egyptians. So they did some deep diving, and what they did was they separated, because they're a duo, they separated and they looked into it themselves, did their own research, looked at the hieroglyphs themselves, and then at the end came together and discussed what they both found, and they both found the same conclusion, basically. And they actually translated the text because they know hieroglyphics. That's how good they are. They can translate it and read it, and this is what they translated the Gosford glyphs to. The ruler and the chief of the foreign land Penu, P-E-N-U, P-E-N-U, have no deception. So if we're just discussing that previous line, they're saying that the chief of the land of Australia, the chief of the foreign land Penu, so what I'm assuming is that they're calling Australia the land of Penu. They're saying that the chief has no deception, that he's honest and kind and probably a nice person. When the storm and north wind blow up again, Captain turned around to the south. The ship turned upside down and then fell upside down. So now they're talking about the crash and the shipwreck. So they're saying that the north wind blew up again and they had to turn south, and then they came and crashed here. We prayed to our gods for help, but many die. God's servant Horus, his protect with his light during the dark moment. So, okay. He's saying that the person writing these hieroglyphs, he is Horus's servant, and he's thanking Horus for his light in the dark moment that he's in. So he's basically giving gratitude to the god Horus. God will keep the hidden burial and give the foreign land heritage. So basically he's saying that he's buried the people that died and that their burial will remain hidden. And that now this foreign land is where they lie, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Eternal life to the deceased will be given power in this place.
Mm.
So this is only a partial transcript They don't, I mean, again, it's over 300 symbols, but they found in looking into the actual hieroglyphs themselves, kind of like a slang in the hieroglyphs, that it's something that you can't just stumble across and create, like the whole soldier theory. So yeah, it's very interesting that this is what they've translated so far. And it makes a lot of sense with the whole them being in Australia thing and not being in Egypt thing. Like, it talks about the boat, and these Egyptologists even mention that there's two words that ancient Egyptians use for boat, just like in English. They use ship and they use boat. And they use the word ship in this context. They didn't use the hieroglyph for boat, they used the hieroglyph for ship, which means that it was not just a regular canoe thing. It was a ship.
So why do you think, in conclusion to all of this now, what do you think could possibly be the motivation for keeping these hieroglyphs, not a secret, but like discrediting them?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think, first of all, the second you admit this, you have to admit a lot of other things too, because if ancient Egyptians could get all the way to Australia, then where else could they go? What could other civilizations do?
Right.
You're not just admitting that Egyptians went to Australia, you're admitting a lot, because there's a lot of other connections between ancient cultures, a lot. And I'm talking like lining up on the globe in a straight line, making an equator around the earth kind of thing. Like, you have such deep connection between ancient cultures all around the world. They have the same architecture. They have the same architecture and way of building things, and same stories. I mean, you go and admit this, you have to then open up Pandora's box to basically a lot of other things.
Yeah, right.
And I think it also gives credit to these cultures that they were a lot more smarter, a lot more advanced than we want to admit. And that also, I think, is just very scary. I think it's just scary for people to admit that we're not that much more advanced than, if anything, we're the advanced, degraded. Yeah. Declined. Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks, Juliet. This was really interesting. And do you have any hints for us what you'll be looking at next in the next video?
I have a few ideas. I want to do the Vatican, the origins of the Vatican. But I also, that's a very big subject, and there's actually...
It's a huge one.
And there's actually an overwhelming amount of information on it. Like, it's a big one. It would take a while to actually bring it into a story, I believe.
Maybe we'd have to do a couple of parts.
Yeah. And then, so we have the Vatican, and then I also want to look into giants, because there's actually surprisingly a lot of information on giants and evidence on giants. And then the other one was the deception of, like, religion and the Bible and hell, because, fun fact, hell was never mentioned in the original Bible. It was something that came later with the King James version. And I think that's a really interesting...
Yeah, maybe that one.
Yeah.
I'd like that. I'd like to know a bit more about that.
Yeah, so there are a few ideas.
Okay, that's it.
That's it. And I just do want to mention quickly that I am wearing pants, because it kind of looks like I'm not wearing pants a little bit. Like, I've just got...
Okay.
I am wearing pants. So...
Bye, everyone.